In 2002, Israel began constructing a 698-kilometer-long separation barrier. According to the United Nations, 20% of the barrier's length runs along the 1949 Armistice Green Line, the border between Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, while the other 80% annexes Palestinian territories. The barrier is 8 meters high and is comprised of a combination of concrete watchtowers, barbed wire fencing with vehicle barrier trenches, and an exclusion area up to 60 meters wide around it. According to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency's Barrier Monitoring Unit, as of July 2012, 60% of the barrier was constructed, 10% was under construction, and 30% was still being planned. Israel argues that the barrier is a necessary security measure and that terrorism has decreased as a result of its construction. However, the barrier does not stop people from crossing into Israel, and every year tens of thousands of Palestinians from West Bank, who could be terrorists, cross the barrier and enter Israel without permits. While the construction of the barrier may not have stopped Palestinians from crossing, it has severely affected their economic, social and political situation. As a result of the barrier's construction, many Palestinians are not able to reach their land to harvest crops, raise animals or work in the Israeli economy. The construction of the barrier has also damaged Palestinian land and property, along with severely altering Palestinian development. As a result of the barrier, many communities are fragmented and families are separated. Residents have been cut off from schools, universities, and specialized medical care. As a result of the barrier's route, Israel has annexed East Jerusalem, the future capital of the Palestinian state, and the former center of life for residents from surrounding suburbs like Bethlehem, Abu Dis, and Ramallah. A journey from Bethlehem to Ramallah through Jerusalem, which used to take 1 hour, today takes twice as long as residents must go around Jerusalem. Additionally, many local Palestinian tourists are no longer able to access the historic city, which in turn greatly damages the Palestinian economy in Jerusalem. Lastly, the Israeli authorities has banned the Palestinian Authority from providing services and governance to Palestinians in East Jerusalem. Additionally, several discriminatory laws have been created for Palestinian residents who hold different ID cards than Israeli residents of Jerusalem. As a result of these policies and economic pressures, life for Palestinians from Jerusalem has greatly deteriorated and many have been forced to emigrate. Due to the human rights violations and negative humanitarian effects caused by the barrier, many human rights organizations and international law professionals have been vigilant in opposing the barrier's construction and documenting its effects. In 2004, the International Court of Justice passed an advisory opinion that the construction of the barrier was contrary to international law. The following are the main conclusions found in the document. Firstly, the court noted that the barrier increased the possibility that Israel would annex Palestinian territory and set the future borders according to the barrier's route instead of on the 1949 Armistice Line. The court expressed that this de facto annexion would also violate the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people. Secondly, the court refused Israel's argument about the inapplicability of the Fourth Geneva Convention in Palestinian territories since they never belonged to any signing sovereign state. Instead, the court held that since the Palestinian territories fell under Israeli control as a result of war between two signatories of the convention, the provisions of the conventions apply. The court also found that the barrier assists the Israeli settlements whose construction violates Article 49 of the Convention. The set of restrictions imposed on the local population between the barrier and the Armistice Line has also resulted in forced abandonment of the land, which is another violation of Article 49. Additionally, the court found that the confiscation of private land to build the barrier is a violation of Articles 46 and 52 of the Hague Regulations of 1907 and the Article 53 of the Convention. Finally, the court analyzed the barrier under the scope of international human rights law. The court states unequivocally that the human rights law is fully applicable in the Palestinian territories and that the barrier violates rights of various conventions to which Israel is party. The court held that the right of freedom of movement, invasion of privacy from Articles 12 and 17 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the right to work, an adequate standard of living, health, and education are also violated by the barrier. In its conclusion, the court states that Israel was under obligation to terminate the construction of the barrier, dismantle it, and repeal all legislative acts relating to it. Also, they had to pay for all damages caused by the barrier. All states were under obligation not to recognize any consequences of the barrier's construction and not to aid such construction. The United Nations should consider what further action was required to end the construction. Ban Ki-moon. What further action is the United Nations taking to end the construction of the barrier and ensure that other states members to uphold international law and follow the advice of the court? Additionally, what can be done to ensure that Palestinian human rights and humanitarian law are not further violated and that Palestinians are compensated for damages caused by the barrier?